Every day you hand something to tomorrow. Not dramatically, it's not consciously, just quietly. A task you meant to start, a conversation you keep meaning to have, a version of yourself you keep meaning to become. And tomorrow accepts everything you give it, without complaint, without judgment, without consequence. That's why it feels so reasonable. You're not giving up, you're not failing, you're just postponing. And postponing feels nothing like avoidance. It feels responsible. And that feeling is the mechanism. Because tomorrow is not a plan. It's a place where nothing bad can happen yet. No failure, no exposure, no evidence that the task might be harder than you imagined. And every time you go there, your brain registers it as the right decision. Not the easy decision, the right one. That distinction is what keeps you exactly where you are. This is the handoff. And once you see it, tomorrow gets a little smaller. You know the feeling in your chest when you say it. It's not guilt exactly, it's not exactly relief, it's somewhere in between. A slight loosening, like a knot that was tight all day, just gave a millimetre. That's the moment the handoff happens. Not when you open your phone, not when you close the laptop, in that breath before, the one where tomorrow becomes the answer. And here's the thing that nobody tells you about that breath, about that moment. It feels like honesty. Not laziness, not weakness, honesty. You're being realistic about timing. You're acknowledging that today isn't the right conditions. You're being responsible about what you can actually manage. The lie doesn't feel like a lie. It feels like self-awareness. And because it feels like self-awareness, the brain doesn't flag it. It doesn't raise a concern. It doesn't apply skepticism. It registers relief. And relief, arriving before any work was done, is a reward that the brain files carefully. Filed under, this worked. Not this worked long term, not this worked eventually, this worked now. And now is the only tense the brain runs on. Tomorrow has a specific quality that today doesn't have. Today contains feedback. You might find that the task is harder than you thought. You might finish less than you had planned. You might discover that the version of you who is going to do this isn't quite capable as the version you imagined. All of that is available today. Tomorrow contains none of it yet. Tomorrow contains the version of you who hasn't been tested. The version who could still do this. The version who hasn't disappointed themselves yet today. And that version, the untested one, is the most valuable version available. Not because they're more capable, because they're unproven. Before you start, you are the person who could do this. Once you start, you are the person who is doing this. And doing is always harder than could. This is not a discipline problem. This is identity protection. The brain is not failing you when it reaches for tomorrow. It's protecting the image of you that exists before the test. That protection is the default. You You didn't choose it. You didn't decide one morning that avoidance was the right strategy. The default was installed gradually, quietly, by years of small moments in which tomorrow felt safer than today. And defaults, once installed, they don't announce themselves. They just run. Every handoff is a transaction. You give up something, you receive something. What you give up is uncomfortable to name. You give up the exposure, the risk that the task reveals something about your ability, the possibility of starting and finding out it's harder than you thought, the chance that the version of you who was going to do this turns out to be smaller than the version you imagined. What you receive arrives immediately. Relief, a brief absence of pressure, the loosening in your chest, the sense that the problem has been handled. The transaction completes in under a second. And here's the thing that makes it so hard to interrupt. The reward arrives before the work, not as a result of the work, not after the work, before it. Your brain registers that sequence as success. Not consciously, you don't think avoiding this was the right move, but the learning happens anyway. Discomfort appeared, you moved it to tomorrow, the discomfort stopped. Problem identified, problem solved. Method, the handoff. File it, store it, use it again next time. This is why logic doesn't break it. You already know tomorrow will feel like today. You already know motivation doesn't arrive on schedule. You already know the task will still be waiting. And logic addresses the part of you that reasons. The transaction happens in the part of you that feels, and feeling moves faster than reasoning every single time. The obvious cost of the handoff is time. Tasks undone, projects stalled, the gap between where you are and where you know you could be is growing slightly wider each time the transaction completes. That's the cost you can see. The expensive part is the one you can't. Every time the handoff happens and tomorrow arrives without it done, a small piece of evidence is filed, quietly, without announcement, just added to a record you didn't know you were keeping. I said I would, I didn't. One entry, then another, then another. The record doesn't judge, it just accumulates. And at some point, not dramatically, not in a single moment, the accumulation reaches a conclusion. I am someone who doesn't follow through. Not decided, not chosen, concluded from the evidence. And that conclusion is the most expensive thing the handoff takes. Not your time, your belief that your intentions mean something. Once that belief erodes, you still make plans, but you hold them loosely because experience has taught you they don't stick. You still set intentions, but you don't quite trust them. Not all the way, not the way you once did. That erosion didn't happen because you are weak. It happened because a default ran, unchecked, long enough to become evidence, and evidence became identity. It feels like who you are It's what the handoff built. Here is what doesn't change this: willpower, motivation, a better system, a more detailed plan. Those tools all arrive at the same point after the handoff has already happened, after the transaction completed, after the relief was collected, after tomorrow already has the task. The planner on your desk doesn't exist in the second before the drift. The app on your phone doesn't interrupt the moment the handoff occurs. They manage what comes after. They don't touch what comes before. What lives before the handoff is a single moment, the moment the discomfort appears. Before the transaction begins, before tomorrow absorbs it. That moment is where everything is. Not because you can always stop the handoff there, and not because understanding the mechanism removes the pull, but because a handoff you can see is a different thing from a handoff you can't. An invisible default runs automatically. A visible one is a choice, and choices can be made differently. Not through force, not through becoming someone you aren't, through one irreversible action. Not a plan, not a promise, something small that changes what tomorrow inherits. You write one sentence, you send the message, you put on the trainers. Once that happens, tomorrow is no longer carrying the whole thing. It's carrying something that has already started. And something that has already started is a completely different kind of weight. Tomorrow doesn't disappear. It just stops being in charge.